What's going on, everybody? Special guest here. It's Ben Roberts, covers Kentucky for the Lexington Herald-Leader. We're going to talk about Miami, Kentucky basketball. They're going to play on November 28th, first time since 2008, in the inaugural ACC SEC Challenge. Ben, I really want to get into this Kentucky team. Very fascinating. Every year, Kentucky has a lot of turnover. You were in Toronto for the Global Jam there. They played 4 games, won all 4. But before we get into the actual specifics, but just maybe some initial takeaways, what you saw from the Wildcats being there.
Yeah, I mean, I think not everyone knew exactly what to expect. Obviously, it's basically a whole new team this season, and we say that a lot with the John Calipari era, but it's even to a higher degree this time around with all of the new faces and especially all the new freshmen. So, a lot of us have been following especially these freshmen for a while since they were recruits, but until you see them against that kind of college length, size, in this case, I think ability that they saw up in Toronto on the other side, you don't really know what you're going to get. I just from measuring the fan base, kind of while I was up there and then since, I think most people saw a version of a Kentucky team that was better than they thought it would be. This offseason has been pretty hectic from Kentucky's end. They lost a whole lot of scholarship players. 4 to the NBA draft and then 4 to the transfer portal, and talking about guys who were really key contributors last season, and really didn't add a whole lot. They got lucky with a transfer late, but were really striking out in the transfer portal for a lot of it. So I would say a majority of the fan base, it's fair to say, was on edge through this offseason. And I think those 4 games in Canada maybe brought some people back and at least gave them a little more hope than they might have going into it.
And certainly we'll get into this kind of early, a lot can happen, but the early projected starting 5, we'll get into that. And from a Miami perspective too, I'll kind of lay out where Miami stands. They're going to go to France for their trip, 10-day trip. They start in early August. We'll get a chance to meet with Jim Larrañaga before then. So looking forward to that about Miami's team. But again, a lot of same players for Miami. Ben, one thing that stood out to me, and I want you to touch on this a little bit, just the playing style. Sheway moves on, playing in the post quite a bit. Kentucky was. And again, with those centers, maybe you could touch on the injuries there, but what you saw in Toronto, could you see this team essentially shooting more threes, playing more up-tempo? I don't want to say the modern basketball, but just the 5 out, just the things you see around college basketball. Obviously, Miami had plenty of success last year going to that. Other teams have. Miami goes to their first Final Four playing with a small ball lineup. What do you think of that? Is that something that Kentucky could see again with the talent they still have at center? Those injured guys.
Yeah, I think the Oscar situation the last 2 seasons here was really interesting to watch because I mean, he was such a beloved player by the fan base, and obviously he did things on the court that literally nobody else in the country could do or really has done for the last couple of decades at least. But at the same time, Cal has not really had a player like that, and it kind of did hinder some of the things that he likes to do. He likes to have his big men, one, protect the rim a lot better than Oscar did. That was not a strength at all, and that has been a strength of Cal's best teams here. So they didn't have that. That really affected their defense and the way they played defensively. And then it also, having Oscar down there, he was able to kind of step out to the elbow and hit some shots, but it really clogged the lane quite a bit. And that sometimes Cal has those dribble drive teams that can really go at it and create space and kick out and look pretty electric offensively, and then sometimes he doesn't when he doesn't have the right personnel, and it kind of went back and forth with Oscar's teams. And last season when other guys weren't on, it was a difficult watch at times offensively. So yeah, I think even when those 2 centers come back, Ugonna and Aaron Bradshaw, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Aaron Bradshaw playing the 4 even. He's so skilled for a 7-footer. He can shoot threes. He can even put the ball, on the floor a little, but he's just a completely different kind of skill set. And then Ugonna is that. I mean, from what we've seen so far and what he's been billed at, he is that rim protector that Cal really covets and really loves having back there. So that's going to change their dynamic. But then it looks like this is going to be a team that really, really attacks. They have a new assistant coach, John Welch, who was in the NBA for about 20 seasons, and kind of met Cal along the way. He was one of the early adopters of the dribble drive offense, as Cal was. Actually, Welch kind of indirectly introduced Cal to that style when he was at the Grizzlies and Cal was at Memphis. From talking to the players, some of the other coaches, it sounds like their playing style might be a little different with Welch involved. And I know Cal does kind of want to go a little more in that direction. He talked about 5 out in Canada. He has a Trey Mitchell, who was their late transfer, is a very, very skilled 6'9" power forward. He's not a banger. He's not a guy, I mean, he'll fight, but he's not a guy who really goes down inside and is going to be anything close to an Oscar rebounder. He can step out. He can hit threes. I think that's the style they want to play. I don't think they're going to shoot 25 threes a game or anything like that, because Cal's got DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards, guys who can get to the basket. But as that kind of defense collapses, I think it is going to open up opportunities for guys to get open shots on the perimeter, and they have to show that they can hit them. Outside of they took a lot of threes in Canada. Outside of Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell, nobody shot better than 33%, and it might be a stretch to think that more than one or two of these guys are going to shoot better than that during the season. But I do think they're going to play more of a faster pace. Cal likes his teams to run when he has the personnel, and it looks like he's got the personnel to do it this season.
Let's stay with that personnel. You're dropping some names here. Trey Mitchell on his fourth team. Obviously he's had success early on at UMass, goes to Texas and West Virginia, now to Kentucky. And as you mentioned, that kind of that stretch four that can knock down shots. We've seen that throughout his career. Let's talk about this again. Projected starting five. A lot can happen before Miami and Kentucky face each other, and the official schedule hasn't been released yet for either team. But it looks like, if we're to guess, maybe 6 or 7 games will be both those teams will have before they face each other there in late November on the 28th. Miami's 1-3 against Kentucky. They won the last meeting there in 2008. It was also at Rupp Arena, and with the personnel, the projected starting five, can you kind of just lay it out the way you're looking at it right now at this point in time? Again, a lot can happen before Miami and UK get going there, but obviously, even before the season, a lot's going to happen.
Yeah, I think from what we've seen and heard so far, I think you could pretty much lock 4 guys into that starting five. One is DJ Wagner at point guard. I mean, he's been basically billed as the number 1 recruit in his class since he was in middle school. He fell a little in those rankings, but he's still a definite top 10 type of guy, a projected NBA lottery pick type of guy, and just has the confidence that Cal's best freshman point guards in the past have had. A different type of player from a John Wall or Brandon Knight, some of the others, but he has that confidence about him, and that's going to be big for him early on. Justin Edwards, another projected NBA lottery pick. He's more of a 3. Antonio Reeves, by far their most experienced player coming back, at least as a Kentucky Wildcat. He was their leading backcourt scorer last year. Came off the bench some last year because they had some different personnel, but I would pin him into that starting 2 spot. And then Trey Mitchell, Cal, he's been on campus for, I think, a month actually today. I think he committed about a month ago. And Cal clearly just absolutely loves his game. He's obviously a 5th-year player, smart, makes the extra pass, just seems like the type of guy who does whatever you need him to do and is perfectly happy playing that role. Now, past that, it was clear up in Canada that playing Trey at the 5, which they had to do with both those injured guys out, is not going to get you many rebounds, and Cal stresses rebounding to every team he has. Rebounding and defense are kind of what he builds his teams on. So I don't think they want to go into a situation where you've got Trey as basically your 5 for most of the game. So I would imagine when Ugonna and Yenso, Aaron Bradshaw, assuming they get back to 100% health before the season, I would guess whichever of those 2 players best fits that personnel is who he'll have out there at the beginning. Maybe something changes and you have a guy like a Rob Dillingham, another freshman guard, or even Reed Shepard, another freshman guard who impressed a lot of people up in Canada. Maybe they could kind of wiggle into that starting 5, but I think it's going to be one of those bigs who gets the 5th spot.
I think that, just outside looking in, just looking at Kentucky each and every year, I think that's one of the most fascinating things about it, essentially how Coach puts together the team. A lot of talent, but you can go a lot of different ways. especially, as you mentioned with this team, you could go with Rob there in there, kind of another scoring guard, or they go with the big. I mean, it is fascinating. And hearing the freshmen, another talented recruiting class, saw a lot of those guys, watched them last summer on the Nike EYBL circuit. So I had a chance to see them. And we touched on Bradshaw, just one of those bigs that can block shots at the rim. As you mentioned, that's what they look for, but also can step out. He was fun to watch. DJ Wagner, I want you to kind of maybe expand on him a little bit. Personally, I was a big fan of DeJuan Wagner, his father. Watched all of his games that season at Memphis. He had a fantastic player, has a chance to be the first third-generation NBA player, which is a lot of fun. But DJ in particular, as you mentioned, Ben, you said he's a little bit different than what we've seen the way it looks right now with other Kentucky talented point guards. Maybe what stands out to you about DJ? What did you notice there in Canada, averaging nearly 16 points a game?
Yeah, like you, I saw him quite a bit on the recruiting circuit going back to very early in his high school career. And, he was, when I saw him, he was always a little hit and miss as far as the production and especially some of the decision making in the half court. You get him in space, you get him in transition. His peers could not stop him at all. And I think it's going to be really hard even for veteran college basketball players to stop him in those type of situations. But when you could force him into having to make those snap decisions, you would see him, turnovers, force shots, some stuff like that. What I was really blown away with how he played in Canada is you see guys who have that confidence against fellow 16, 17-year-olds. And then when they're going up against older guys, longer guys, especially more physical guys, they kind of, take a step back, slow it down a little, play a way they're not really used to playing. DJ was DJ up in Canada. And just from talking to him and getting to know him even better over the last few weeks, I think DJ is going to be DJ as soon as the college basketball season starts, when they play Kansas, when they play Miami, when they play these veteran SEC teams. He's just so confident. He's so sure of himself in a good way. And I think as the point guard, especially on a freshman heavy team, that kind of bleeds to everybody else and people feed off that. He has all the talent. He has all the ability in the world. It's just going to be kind of harnessing that and listening to Cal and listening to these other coaches and kind of playing within himself in the offense. And I thought he did a great job with that up in Canada. His playing style, there's always going to be 2 or 3 shots a game where it's like, oh, he forced that, or maybe he shouldn't have taken that shot. But he's the type of guy who can make that shot. And I think Cal wants him to create those opportunities for himself and take those chances. And I think that dynamic is going to be, from what we've seen so far, at least, it's going to be a very good one. And we know Cal's track record with those type of point guards, with Derrick Rose and John Wall and then all the others he's had.
And I think that battle from a Miami standpoint is going to be interesting in the backcourt, but I think all the matchups are. And I know Kentucky fans weren't really excited about this matchup, especially with it being the first ACC SEC challenge. Maybe you'd like to see maybe Duke or North Carolina. Kentucky did play them a couple years ago, but still those matchups are premier matchups in college basketball. But Miami gets the opportunity. Miami returns 3 of their starting 5 from the Final Four team. But they lose the top 2 leading scorers in Jordan Miller and Isaiah Wong, the player of the year in the conference last year. And for me, my perspective on a Miami standpoint, the way it looks, those 3 will start. They bring in Matthew Cleveland, leading scorer at Florida State. He comes in. Florida State didn't have the success last year, not a very good team, but Cleveland steps in at the 4. And then I think they're going to bring Bensley Joseph off the bench, a point guard in the backcourt, distributing type guy. And for me, I think the one thing that from a Miami standpoint, those 5 guys, none of those 5 guys have had success on teams without Wong or Miller, regardless of what school they were at, even at Miami. I think it's going to be a new look and who's going to step up. 3 of those guys with Cleveland, Omier, and Pack have all led their teams in scoring at one point during a season. So they've got ability, but I think, essentially who's going to step up as this leader, as the go-to guy, that will be interesting. And I think, too, with the backcourt situation, we touched on Wagner and Reeves and whatever they might want to do with Rob or with Shepard there. But from Miami's not going to be a big backcourt. Pack's not very big, maybe listed at 6 foot. Bensley Joseph at 6'1", so they're going to be small in the backcourt. So that'll be interesting to watch. And to me, Ben, I think a really key matchup to watch for in this game. Again, we got months to discuss it, but I think Woogle Poplar from Miami going against Justin Edwards. And I think with Poplar, if Miami's going to really really be up there at the top again at the ACC, Poplar at the 3 has to really take a jump. He goes scoreless in the Final Four game. had a lot of attention, potential NBA talent taking a jump and all that stuff, but he just didn't shine and when they needed him most in that big game. And obviously a lot of things didn't go right against UConn, but I think Poplar against Edwards or even with Hierro there, I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch for from a Miami standpoint. Both these teams could be ranked in the top 25, so it'll be interesting. Ben, before we wrap this up, I guess I just want to talk about Kentucky in general with where they're at. They had a lot of success, the Final Fours early on with Calipari, and do you think fans are getting a little bit restless? They're still winning a bunch of games, but maybe for that deep tournament run. And essentially, what do you think it'll take for this Kentucky team to, put it all together and have a strong regular season, get that high ranking and obviously have that deep tournament run that they're looking for from the fan base, the fans, coaches, everybody that follows Kentucky basketball?
Yeah, as far as putting it together, I don't think there's a huge margin of error for this group. I think they're going to have DJ Wagner and Justin Edwards live up to that, not just that NBA lottery potential, but that type of production as freshmen. They're going to get every opportunity. I mean, both those guys are going to be 30, 32 plus minute type of guys. So they're going to get every opportunity to do it, and they're going to have to do it and do it consistently. We knew Trey Mitchell was a huge addition at the time. It was even more apparent watching them play up in Canada just how important he is going to be to that team. He's not probably going to show up on the ESPN bottom line with his stats on very many occasions, but just the little things he does and finding a way to produce. If he can do that on a game-to-game basis, that's going to be big. And then the two bigs, I mean, I've written a ton in the past month and going back to last season about when they don't have that rim protection, they aren't the same teams. They aren't the Cal teams, and they really need at least one of those guys and maybe both to take off and be that 20-minute, 25-minute a game dependable center that you can rely on back there. If they don't, if both those guys, if the injuries linger or they can't live up to that, I think they're really going to face some problems, especially with some of these bigger teams that they're gonna find, especially in conference play and then on in the NCAA tournament. Yeah, and as the fan base part of it, yeah, they're restless. Cal had almost unprecedented success his first 6 years here with the national title, with the 4 Final Fours, with the almost 40-0 season, which would have been something. And then since then, I mean, they haven't been back to a Final Four since that loss to Wisconsin, and that loss was up there with the Christian Laettner game for a lot of fans around here, and to lose like that and to get your perfect season ended one game before you thought you were going to have a chance to play for the perfect season national title, and then to have this drought. I mean, they've had good teams. They've been to 2 Elite Eight games. One basically on a last-second shot. The other one went to overtime. They lost them both. They had the loss to St. Peter's is still sticking with people. And then last year they start preseason top 5, and you got the National Player of the Year back. You've got some other veterans that you think can make a difference. You got Cason Wallace, NBA lottery pick as a freshman, and it's sitting here early February, and you don't know if you're going to make the tournament. It was a really last season, I think, was just such a roller coaster ride for people. And to end in the first week of the NCAA tournament, they haven't been past that since 2019, which is inexcusable to most of the fan base. They're on edge, they're restless, and they want something huge. And I think to get a large portion of that portion of the fan base off of Cal's back, I think they do have to get to the Final Four. They have to get to another Final Four, and that's always going to be what they're chasing. Obviously, when you get there, you're going to want to win the national title, but I think getting there is the first step to mending some of those fences, so to speak. And it's going to be an uphill climb. I mean, it's a whole lot of new players. I would guess they'll probably start the preseason somewhere on the back end of the top 20, somewhere between 16 and 20 maybe. So it's not like they're expected to do it, but around here they're always expected to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Ben, it's great talking college basketball. It's great that Miami's going to have this matchup, and we'll see how it goes in November. But thanks for your time. It's very valuable, great insight, and we'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.